Now I'm going to show you some useful brush strokes that you can use throughout your paintings when you're actually painting in watercolour. And first of all, I want to show you how to hold the brush correctly, basically avoiding holding the brush at the extremes, so there or there. You're not going to have any control of that brush whatsoever. So to get proper control, hold the brush round about where the ferrule meets the shaft of the brush. And the most important thing is to make sure that you keep your hand in contact with the paper. So you can either extend your little finger down or hold the whole side of your hand to the paper, and the movement of the brush, the pressure that you apply to that brush, is through the thumb and the forefinger. And that gives you full control over what you're painting and how you're using the brush. So first, just a very simple brush stroke, just to get you used to applying paint to paper. So holding the finger down to the paper and the brush tip pointing towards you, draw the brush across the paper. And there you've got a nice straight sharp edge, ideal if you're painting up to a definite edge. Now let's try revolving that brush through 90 degrees and pointing the tip in the direction that you're painting the brush with. So let's go with this one. Again, the hand in contact with the paper to get full control over that brush. Now let's try some pressure control strokes. These might not be particularly useful in a painting, but they're certainly useful to practice with. Now the first one is to really just touch the point onto the paper and gradually increase that pressure, and then take the pressure off. Now the control here is not only exercised through the thumb and the forefinger, but I've locked my wrist and I'm using the full flow of the arm. That's taking the brush across the paper. The pressure at the same time is applied through the thumb and the forefinger. Let's have another go at that one. This really isn't as easy as it looks. Nice and gently. Now let's try a variation on that and using a more undulating curvy line to the pressure stroke. Starting thin, pressure on, pressure off. Have a go at those, they really are quite important to get that control. Now I'm going to show you a couple of ways of creating useful textures in your paintings just by utilising particular brush strokes. The first one I'm going to paint is what we call a dry brush stroke, and it's rather strangely named dry brush stroke. It actually means less paint on the brush. So you load the brush with paint, and then all you have to do is just take some of that paint off on the side of the palette. Now in this particular brush stroke you're utilising the belly of the brush, so where the brush swells, that's what you're dragging along the paper, and try to avoid touching the tip of the brush to that paper. And to do this stroke you really need this brush to be quite flat down, so you can either hold it virtually upside down, or if you find it any easier then hold it from above and drag the brush across. Let's see how we go on with this. I'm utilising the surface texture of this paper. It's very important when you're painting with watercolour to use watercolour paper. And I know that sounds really obvious, but it's designed for watercolour and it does have a lovely surface texture to it. And what's happening with this brush stroke is that the paint is hitting and missing these undulations in the paper surface, and I can gradually build up textures. A similar stroke to this is what we call a scumbling brush stroke. So again, taking some paint onto the brush. Now you can use a little more paint on the brush this time than the dry brush. What we're doing is keeping the brush in contact with the paper, flat down, so again either hold the brush upside down or hold it from above, and you just scumbling on the paint, brush it around in different directions, building up some nice varied texture. Dry brush and scumbling. Now let me show you some more ways of creating textures in your paintings, and this one is what we call stippling, and this really does use control of this brush. So make sure that you've got your hand in contact with the paper and hold the brush virtually upright to your paper, and working gradually across you can stipple in. I've got a full brush with paint here, gradually stippling in smaller and larger dots. Now this is really lovely for suggesting things like trees, leaves, or even textures in a foreground area. All I'm doing is applying more and less pressure in a random fashion to the brush, and if you combine that with stippling with clean water, so this area here is still wet, I'm just stippling there some clean water, that's softening out some of these parts, creating lovely hard and soft edges. Another way of working, which can be quite messy but very effective, is to actually splatter the paint onto your paper, and you can do this from the end of your brush. So just tapping the paint onto the paper. This is a really random technique, and sometimes it can just help to save you from overworking an area. Again, spatter in some clean water, and this is a technique that I really use quite often when I'm painting trees, summer trees. Get this lovely random effect of leaves throughout the tree. One of the common errors when painting washes is to forget about the three-dimensional aspect of the things that you're painting, and to just put on one flat wash of one colour. So let me show you what I mean by that. By suggesting here a shrub. Now I'm using some sap green on its own, so this could be a shrub or a tree in your painting. Bit of shadow there at the bottom where it meets the ground. Now that's just too flat, there's no three dimension to it, there's no light, there's no shade, and there's no variance in colour. So let's see how we can improve on that. This time we'll try to make it much more interesting, give it much more life. The same colour, sap green, and I'm going to introduce some lemon yellow for the lighter part of the tree. So if you imagine part of this tree being lit by the sunlight, and I'll also mix in there some French ultramarine for the shadowed part. So we'll take some lemon yellow, mix it with some of the sap green. Now that's gone really lovely, bright, vibrant green. And now we'll start working back into this tree. Now I'm using the same wash techniques, making sure the leading edge is very wet, imagining that the light is coming from the left hand side. Put some pure sap green in there. Now already just using those two colours you can see the break, the spread in the colour, and it's already got much more interest to it. As we bring that down and mix in some French ultramarine with the sap green, that's made it much cooler, much greyer, and this is lovely for the shadow. Now look at that, it's really got some three dimension already. I can go even stronger. Let's try some really full strength paint in there, ultramarine, sap green, very dark, and brush that into the bottom corner. That's really where the tree's in shadow, and bring some of that shadow out underneath along there. So with those two illustrations you can see how to create much more interest, much more dimension to shapes. This is quite basic in that we've created a wet into wet almost effect throughout the shape, but let's see now how we can build on that and create further textures with that.
Now available to buy. Try these techniques at home whenever you wish. The extended DVD of today's workshop is now available from the Painting and Drawing channel. For further information and to order your copy, go to www.paintingdrawingchannel.com.